Kia ora everybody, welcome back to Theology, where we drink tea and talk theology. Today we are drinking English breakfast tea as we are continuing our series going back to basics. So I've uploaded one video in the series so far called Why Theology, and we'll be continuing on talking about some of the different theological areas. We're drinking English breakfast tea because it is a basic tea. I think it's a pretty bog standard cup of tea. But this is T2's blend, so they might use slightly different ratios or a slightly different tea plantation that might make it a bit different. But most of the time, most English breakfast tastes the same. Especially when you add milk to it, you lose a lot of the nuance of flavour that you might get otherwise. But there is something really comforting about drinking English breakfast tea with milk. So today we are talking about biblical or exegetical theology. Most of the time I would refer to it as biblical theology because I feel like this is actually the focus of what it's about, and it emphasizes to me really the focus that it's bringing to the theological tradition. Every area of theology works together to come up with a cohesive whole, but they all have slightly different focuses because we can't do everything at once. So, exegesis is a big word that is used a lot in theology, and if you're just getting into reading what other people have done or just getting into more academic work and study or reading, that sort of thing, you're going to come across the idea of exegesis a lot. And it's essentially about discovering the original intended meaning of the text. So it's going, what do the words mean in this text in their ancient language? What are the specific themes being drawn on here that set it in the wider biblical story? Who's the intended audience? What's the context for this passage? Why was this included in the Bible? So kind of who was saying it, who was it being said to, why was it being said? It also involves looking at it in the original language. So a lot of biblical scholars will either have some knowledge of Hebrew or Greek. I am not a biblical scholar. I have bits of knowledge of Hebrew and Greek, random words as they're relevant for what I'm studying, but I cannot read Hebrew or Greek. I really commend all of those who do. At the moment, I am actually studying my first biblical studies paper, so the first paper that is really focused on biblical theology, and it's been really interesting. There's a lot of detail and things that I just was not aware of as conversations or discussions, and terminology that I spent a lot of time Google searching, because there's a lot of really specific terms to biblical theology. Now, this doesn't by any means make it inaccessible, because in many ways, whenever we read the introduction part of a book of the Bible, we're engaging in biblical theology. When we are reading our Bible and trying to understand what's going on, this is engaging in forms of biblical theology. And how good your biblical theology is really depends how well you read your Bible. I've got various commentaries on the New Testament, because understanding the Bible is really crucial to Christianity. And so having really good biblical theologians is really, really important. So that you'll get some theologians who might specialize in a different area that, because of what they're doing, will end up doing a lot more biblical theology. This is slightly different to a biblical scholar, as someone who spends their time and life, and the focus of the work is unpacking the Bible. So the approach is slightly different, and the focus is slightly different. So some, probably one of the most well-known biblical scholars at the moment, I would say, is N.T. Wright. He is a New Testament Pauline scholar. So that means his teaching, so his a lot of his focus of his work is on Paul. He speaks Greek. Does he speak Greek? He can read Greek and translate Greek. The biggest work he's done has been on Paul, but he's done a lot of other work. He is primarily focused on the New Testament. So an Old Testament theologian, biblical scholar that I think is really good is a guy called Walter Brueggemann. He's done a whole lot of work, written commentaries for each book of the Old Testament, and he writes written commentaries for each book of the New Testament. And both of them, their works have really helped me understand those books more. So I would look at engaging with them if you want to get a little bit more into biblical theology. So really the heart of biblical theology is like, what is the text trying to communicate itself? Without appealing to church dogma, a doctrine, or tradition, what is the church trying to say? How does this part of the story fit in with the whole story? But what is it saying in and of itself? What's this story trying to communicate? Kind of, the Bible is a unified story. It is one story being told throughout history, but it is also written by many different authors in many different time periods, and it draws on lots of different sources that help make it the whole thing it is. Even within books, you probably have multiple authors, and within books, you often have multiple sources. And so how all of these are brought together, where those came from, to the extent that we can understand where those came from, can really help us richen and deepen our understanding. And I'm not saying you have to go do all this work yourself. This is the work the biblical scholars do, and then we read their stuff and it helps us deepen our understanding. We then learn how to communicate that to other people, and it helps other people deepen their understanding. It is approaching the text with the nuance and ambiguity that it deserves, because it is a complicated book. And there is simple truth, there is simplicity in it, but there is also complexity. And we should not reject the complexity and reject it as a narrative in favor of it being a real book. And this is particularly important when we look at the different genres and the purpose of those different genres, and how those understanding of those genres have changed over time. So we talk about the historical books, and we're talking about like 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, 1st and 2nd Samuel, or really just like Samuel, Kings, and Chronicles, because their separation is only due to scroll length. Those are not histories in the way that we do histories. They're history written from a very specific lens, particularly Samuel and Kings is history written through the lens of Deuteronomy, is the currently held opinion. They're a part of what we call, or what is called, the Deuteronomist history. And so a lot of the themes being emphasized in Samuel and Kings are really prominent, important themes in Deuteronomy in particular. And those themes are kind of present in the rest of the Pentateuch, but there's kind of this different thing that Deuteronomy does in how it emphasizes God's divinity and authority over things. So yeah. And so finding the balance of what it means for something to be seen as divinely inspired, or the word of God, but be through people and trying to understand the story that it's telling, is at the heart of biblical theology, at least from my understanding. And biblical theology is really, it's involved in every discipline of theology. You can't engage in most fields of theology without an engagement with the Bible. And because every good conversation about God and theology should be centered on the Bible, because if we get rid of the Bible, what do we have? And it should bear the significance that it has on the importance and the relevance of the conversation that is given to this amazing book that most of our understanding of Christianity is derived from. However, biblical theology is a lot more focused on what the Bible is trying to say, especially to the people who would have first heard it. How I think of it is that biblical theology, its focus is on the history of redemption, because that to me is one of the key things that the Bible is working through and telling the story of, is God's redemption over and over again, his redemption of humanity. And so biblical theology really is focusing on this specific history of redemption. That might be simplifying it too much, and there will probably be so many biblical scholars that disagree with me, but that's been my understanding and my perception, and part of that is because of the views that I hold about the Bible and what the biblical story is, because I believe it is a story of redemption. That's a whole different video about why I think that I've made allusions to in the past. But so then, as a layperson, or as a person who's not specializing in it, how can we engage with biblical theology? Because engaging with biblical theology is important for growing our faith and understanding, as it can help us better discern what the Bible is communicating and how better to relate it to what is going on in the world. And so how we could do it is by reading the text carefully, going through looking at themes and meditating on the same passage. Not taking verses in isolation, but reading the Bible in the stories and movements and way that it was more originally written, seeing what patterns become evident as we read through. So there are some books where you should just sit down and read them all in one go. Like, just sit down and read all of the gospel. And there is value in really focusing in on the Sermon on the Mount, or certain parts of the Sermon on the Mount. But to start off with, getting the idea for the context that the whole book sits in is really helpful. But with the Psalms, just really meditating on one psalm is a very useful way to read the Psalms. That's not so useful meditating on like one chapter in the same way, or one verse in another book. So that's a bit of a tangent. But reading Bible, how can we read it well so that we can better engage with biblical scholarship and biblical theology? Because understanding our Bible is so important, which is what biblical theology is all about getting across to us. Going through, reading the text carefully, looking for themes, meditating on the same passage, all really good things. Comparing and using different versions is really important, and looking at the different ways a word could be translated can aid and guide our understanding. Because if a word is translated to kill, and another place is translated to slaughter, and another place is translated to murder, it helps us get a better idea of what's going on than just reading slaughter, or just reading kill, or just reading murder. Understanding what genre we are reading and how sometimes this genre is communicated differently throughout the book itself can be quite helpful, and it can help guide our way of reading it. For example, as I said, one Psalm, verse 12 or the first 12 chapters of Genesis, because that's all one story. And it can give us a better understanding, just getting it all in one go and seeing all of these connections that flow through. And reading through chapters and whole stories and some of the histories helps us better understand the context of what's going on. So for me, reading like the end of 1 Kings 16 right through to 2 Kings 2 is this really helpful, because you build on the story of what is Elijah doing, what's going on here, why is what he's doing important. There are then also so many useful resources to help us in engaging with our Bible. You have biblical commentaries and concordances. In a lot of Bibles, there'll be an introduction to a book at the start. Apps, so you have reading plans and devotionals that can help us guide through looking at themes and that sort of thing, and some that really help you get into what the word is saying. In particular, the Bible Project app is absolutely fantastic. They're doing a read through of the themes in the Pentateuch, so the first 5 books of the Bible, and their website has amazing other really good resources on it. So I really recommend checking that out. Yeah, so link some of those down below, and some commentaries that I have used myself or been told very good. So I hope you found this brief overview of biblical theology helpful, and of the field interesting. If there's anything you think I forgot, or I'm confused about, or just want to talk about more, the comment section is always open, and I would love for you to comment and we can have a little conversation there if you want. Generally, I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you want to, you can like and subscribe. See you all next time. Bye!